My story is very unique, as all human stories are. And like so many stories, it begins with my earliest years amongst a rocky marriage between my parents that soon ended in divorce. From there, I went into my preteen years, splitting up my time between the farm I lived on with my mother and my wonderful yet strict Catholic grandparents, and the never-ending revolving door of family and vagabonds that came to stay on their land, and the much less friendly and sometimes downright vicious home of my father's girlfriend, where I actually eventually ended up choosing to stay permanently with a childish hope of saving my father from what I saw as a perilous situation, one in which it turned out he did not want to be saved from. As I trepidatiously walked on eggshells in this house I could never call home, my young mind fantasized about a day in which my parents would just magically get back together and the world would be in right order again. This never came to pass, of course, which left me in a limbo-like purgatory, waiting like a good little dependent for the adults in my world to make me feel whole again. In my discomfort, I rigidly took it upon myself to become as self-sufficient and non-confrontational as possible so that I might not get bullied further at home or at school, and so that I'd never be seen as the obstacle that might deter my parents' reunion. This at least was a sad little plan my young self came up with to avoid being further damaged by my surroundings, and it worked, by the way, until it didn't. In another aspect of my life, with my atheist father and my hippie mother, I found myself seeking some sense of moral structure through my grandparents' religion, choosing for myself to be finally baptized Catholic at 11 years old. This event gravitated my first existential crisis to crop up, in which I, in the intense fear and paralysis that often accompanies deep existential questioning, proceeded to lose my mind through compulsive, unstoppable emotional expression, protrusively crying for days on end. This lasted a couple weeks before my young mind at last landed on a way to hold all the chaos together, even if only for a while. I decided that my purpose would be to make headway for humanity regarding answering life's most challenging questions, including what are we here for? What is my purpose? Why do we exist? My fascination with these questions would continue to unfold throughout my life. At this young turning point, I'd subconsciously dedicated myself to stewarding the species forward through chipping away at understanding our existence. Even at 11, I could sense that choosing any other path would only inevitably lead me back to this one. Of course, I chose several others anyway. From modeling to man-eating, no distractions could completely quiet the calling I found myself eternally haunted by. Mercedes, you're here to figure out why you exist, what this is all for, and to help other people who are trying to do the same. I did not want to, because I somehow knew that to open this can of existential worms again would mean that I'd have to feel all of it, all of the horror and the imperfections and the evil inside of me. I'd have to think about death and evil a lot. I'd have to slow all the way down, become present with the uncomfortable realities going on in my world instead of living in the fantasies of my mind. I'd have to face my true self with all of its flaws and unacceptable parts, and I'd have to take responsibility for those parts of me. I'd have to stop taking the easy route by blaming others for my hardships and flaws. I'd have to stop playing the victim, and I'd have to learn the truth about others too and confront where I was interacting with them in unhealthy ways. I'd have to admit to being wrong, being abused, being abusive, being imperfect, being scared, and that was unbearable. So I resisted and avoided turning inward and taking an introspective look at myself until one day when I was 26 years old and the lid blew completely off. Standing on stage under the bright lights of live TV, I felt the tingly numbness, the shortness of breath, the sheer terror of my first panic attack. At this, the floodgates were opened, and over the next couple of years, I grew increasingly unstable, experiencing all manner of panic, anxiety, and depression. Peculiarly, I had met the love of my life in this era, which seemed to only ramp up my mental symptoms, sending me into what could be called a mental breakdown, and bringing with it my second opportunity to lose my mind. Alas, the resistance is strong in this one. It would still be several years of seeing every doctor under the sun, reading countless books, soul-searching, rigidly researching and studying self-help in every direction before finally realizing that, after all, it was truly my mind that needed to be lost, or at least loosened a little bit. I was so deeply identified with my mind as my mind that I couldn't see how it could possibly be the main problem. It was the one thing that I'd always relied upon to keep me safe and get me through everything I'd faced in my life. It was my safe place. If it was no longer safe, then where did that leave me? And what was also blocking me from this realization was a core belief that if my mind was the problem, I would be deemed crazy and unfit for society, exiled by my family and friends, sentenced to live a life of unimaginable pain and suffering, locked away in a padded room. So yeah, it was not easy for me to allow myself to have any problems with my mind, let alone admit them to someone who might actually be able to help me with them. But when I finally did start taking my mental health seriously, I started seeing a coach and adjusted my lifestyle accordingly. I was able to rapidly shift my mindset, settle comfortably into my body, and begin living my life with more presence, integrity, and peace. Now, don't get me wrong. I am no, monk on a mountaintop. I'm not living some ideal of what some might think a spiritual teacher is supposed to be like. I'm existing alongside the madness and the chaos and letting it be a part of my life when it needs to, and learning from it instead of resisting it. Basically, I'm still a spicy little freak with all the juiciness I could ever want out of life, but now I have a deep reverence and understanding for myself and my direction in a way that lets me exist gracefully, feel whole, and show up completely exactly as I am. So many of us, myself included, and especially my former self, spend most of our lives wound up in the nonstop, high-speed, anxious rat race of our minds without realizing that that's not actually where life happens. The mind is a tool that works together with the physical body, the sensations of our physical bodies, and the intuitive awareness of our soul to harmoniously bring us experiences that will enliven and enlighten us. Philosophies from far and wide all point to this same understanding, yet it is rare for humans to embody it. And now, with a decade of being in this work myself, it's my profound pleasure to have stepped further into my incarnation in helping others lose their minds a little, understand themselves in a game-changing way, and give them permission to climb down from their heads and into their hearts to love and live life fully and on purpose. So now that you know my mission, I hope you join me on it by subscribing here and joining me on my social media accounts, or if you're ready to work more directly with me, I invite you to check out my workshops that I offer, or if you're really daring, to apply to work one-on-one with me. Thank you for moving toward your own unraveling. Here is to you, losing your mind a little bit. I'm reminding you, as always, you already are.